once I was given the opportunity to express myself and find out more about my family, I feel more proud about it, and I'm more interested in like figuring out all these bits and pieces of stories. And as I'm writing, I'm learning more about myself and I'm learning more about my family, and I'm creating these connections and these bridges, and I'm learning like what am I interested in, what am I passionate about now. And I think it really made me appreciate the stories my family would tell me, and I'm not little Iris anymore, kind of bored at the dinner table, like, oh my goodness, I want to go play with my toys now.
This is People and Their Poems, a podcast about the poems that make a difference in our world. People and Their Poems is presented by Ornog Mountain Publishing. Thanks for joining us today.
Welcome to People and Their Poems podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Carlson, and I'm here today with Iris Hida. She is a senior at Rockville High School in Vernon, Connecticut, and she is the recipient of an honorable mention for her poem, Inscription, a haibun that she wrote and submitted to the Connecticut Poetry Society's DeCarlo High School Poetry Competition. So thank you for joining me today, Iris.
Thank you for having me.
And I was so excited to read your poem and to enjoy work in that format that you don't see all the time. Mm-hmm. And to have the opportunity to talk to you as a young poet about what inspires you or what got you writing, what got you to a place where you felt like you wanted to submit something to a contest. So would you talk about that?
Of course. I think when I started writing, it was definitely like a family thing for me. My father immigrated here from Albania and he wrote poetry a lot in Albania, so that kind of transferred over here into America a little bit. I have an older sister and she started writing poetry as well. She went through the creative writing program at my high school, and I just saw how many opportunities that gave her through contests or even programs, and just a different community that you're meeting that's so much different than a regular academic setting that you're getting in a high school, and how that really just opens up so many more doors for you. So writing and poetry definitely becomes a little bit of a family business when it comes to my family. And I think that's where I really got the inspiration that I think this is what I want to do, because I grew up around it. You know, I went to my sister's poetry readings all the time, and I would sit there and I was like, wow, I'm really liking this, and I think this is something I'm going to try out. So I joined the creative writing program at my high school, had an amazing teacher, Miss Nordland, and she was really inspiring and the kickstart to my creative writing career. And I was always being encouraged to apply to contests, whether it was from my sister, from Miss Norland herself. And I think that's really what got me out of my shell and made me feel confident in what I was writing. And it didn't become so much as a personal thing, but something I wanted to express and share with others and make universal stories for everyone.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. So I have two questions to follow up on that. And the first one is, what does that look like in your family? To have that kind of community of writers within the house writing. Do you guys read your poems to each other? Do you give each other like feedback? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so especially I think it's a little bit harder for my father to share his writing because his writing was mostly in Albanian. And when he immigrated here, he kind of had to lose his touch with that a little bit in order to adapt what was happening here in America and for him to start this new life. So I definitely see that disintegrating a little bit when he wants to talk about poetry and writing, and he feels a little bit like on guard about it. But when I'm talking to my sister about it, I mean, we're 10 years apart, 9 years apart. So it's really interesting to see how different like the creative writing program changes, but also what stays the same, and how like different like practices that we're given or different poems that we're reading and how we sort of interpret them differently, or how we took our own spin on it just because of that age gap. And it's really, I guess it's not so much a conversation in my house where it's structured, but I kind of comes up a lot more naturally because it's something that we all find a passion in. And unfortunately, my mom doesn't write, so she likes to take it in and she learns some bits and pieces of us as well.
That's really great to have an appreciative mom as an audience in the house too. That's
Yes,
pretty
she's very
amazing.
supportive.
So, with regard to your creative writing teacher in that environment, you talked about Ms. Nordland kickstarting your creative writing. What would you say is the single most important trait that a poetry mentor offers to an aspiring writer?
I would say the most important trait for a mentor to have is somebody that's ready to be open and listen to what you have to say. I think it's very easy for a mentor to have one way that they like to write and one way that they think poetry should be specifically. Um, and luckily for me, Miss Norland is so open-minded, and whenever I had trouble writing a poem or I just wasn't sure what turn to take, she would give me many options so that it still felt personal to me and it didn't feel like she was writing my poem for me. And I think that's really important, especially when you're a young poet. You really get drilled into your mind from other academic courses, like what's wrong and what's right. And creative writing is the one time where anything is right, you know? So it's important to be able to have a mentor that can distinguish the two for you and give you a moment where you can breathe and have your space within your writing.
It's a really important discipline. It's also an important life practice. I find
Right.
going to poetry readings and listening to people, that whole act of listening
Mm-hmm.
is for me, it's the highest expression of democracy, that we can communicate as our creative selves and our imaginative selves and bring something new to the table, or a new perspective that we've processed through a creative lens, and offer that as some aspect of ourselves. So I think it's really wonderful that you have a teacher that's modeling that and making that possible for you.
Right. And it's also the aspect of being able to respect what somebody else is saying, because maybe you don't agree with what their poetry is saying or what their writing is saying, because it can become very personal, very opinionated sometimes. But another aspect of a good leader is being able to respect what's happening and work and help your student to the best that you can.
Oh, so well said. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And that is what is, I think, one of the gifts of a poetry reading is the recognition that people have put time, effort, thought in themselves
Mhm.
into the work. It isn't just a bunch of volcanoes going off in a public space. It's that thoughtfulness, that expression of self that comes from a valued place, that is seeking value, being valued. So it's a very mutual process. What kind of public reading opportunities have you had within your poetry group, in your high school, and in your community? And I know you got something coming up, so maybe you could mention that too.
Yes. So, the summer going into my junior year, I did an apprenticeship at the Mark Twain House and Museum, the Nick Firm Writers Collaborative, and that was really impactful to my writing career. I ended up writing my college essay about it. And by staying in touch with the directors there and also the teachers there, I was able to land another poetry reading happening at the Mark Twain House. So that's one of my upcoming events I have, but also more locally. There's an Arts Center East building here in Vernon, Connecticut, and we have a program called Poetry Rocks that the Vernon Poet Laureate Peggy Dietz Shea runs. I love her so much and I really admire her. Every year she highlights one Rockville creative writing student. It's every other month, I believe, and it's an open poetry reading. She invites three other published poets or local poets to come and join with them to read, and there's an open mic at the end, and she's always very good at finding different Rockville students so everybody gets that opportunity and the practice to go out and read publicly, but also in a more safe community because it's local and it's small. So I've had a few times where I get to read at those events. There's also an ekphrastic extravaganza that happens every year there, and a local photographer or artist sends in their work, and a Rockville creative writer gets to choose a piece of their artwork and write a poem next to it. So my 4 years of high school, I've participated in that as well. I think Art Center East is one of the places where I get my most practice in reading my poetry.
You speak so well for the community that you're a part of, and the opportunities they create for you and other young
Mhm.
poets and other poets, period. I think that's really wonderful. Would you share some of your poetry with us now?
Of course. Okay. I have a poem titled Extraction, and it's a bit more about my grandmother again. I'm very inspired by my family and what they've been through. So it's called Extraction. In fifth grade, grandmother is forced to learn Russian. Communism is pouring in, flooding. Father teaches her siblings Italian at the dinner table in front of five plates a third of the way full. She says that tongue is not for her, regrets the decision later in life. In college, grandmother performs autopsies, carves, cuts, slices into body. Later finds out the bones used to hold her neighbor, except now starved, imprisoned, and shot dead. When her father passes, she drops the path to be a doctor, becomes pediatric dentist instead, still cannot stand the smell of another's rotten teeth.
Wow, the your use of imagery to communicate what family life was like and the hardship is unbelievable. Thank you very much. Is
You.
that a historical poem? Is that factual?
Yes, while my family lived in Albania, it was just beginning the fall of the dictatorship there. So my parents more so experienced the civil war that happened afterwards, but my grandparents were there for the dictatorship and how harsh and cruel that they treated everybody and really oppressed their personal expression. And I think that also goes into my writing and how I want to really take charge of my ability to express myself and also share their stories.
Wow, that that's every teacher's dream, every parent's dream, right? That those experiences and those stories can become
Right.
the building block of your own sense of who you are and your own place in this world. That's powerful. Would you read another one?
Of course.
All right.
Okay. So this one's inspired by the Mark Twain house, actually. So a little bit of branding. And I had done some research and I found out that there was vandalism that happened at the Mark Twain house, and kids had thrown bricks at the house. And there's the sunroom, and it's enclosed in glass, and there's plants going everywhere. And I got really inspired by that for some reason because when I was going through a tour, I learned that there's one plant that survived the vandalism, and that really sparked this poem, and is titled Supple. Green snakes onto glass wall, breathing, cracked fragments of reckless actions, child's play. It was just a joke. My climbing fig watches the rest suffocate while it stays, breathing and alive. Leaves that sucker like tentacles. Stay around a little longer, it tells itself. Just a little longer. And maybe self-discipline is a side hustle to photosynthesis, or grief does not exist, and there has always been climbing fig ancestors that just want to keep breathing.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Iris. Just thinking about your other stories and the experiences that have shaped you, what kind of came together in my mind with the image of the plant trying to survive. That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Get another one?
I do. Another
Okay.
grandmother one.
All right.
Um, so in Albania, we have our own version of fried dough, and it's called petula, and it's fried dough, but think savory. So you serve it with feta cheese or some salt or some kind of sauce on the side instead of powdered sugar. So this is titled petula. Grandmother smacks tongue and lips, sits and stirs in the kitchen, squinting over the microwave light. The oil on the stovetop is gurgling her language, supposedly mine too. An apron dresses me with brown polka dots and grease from the batch we made before. Grandmother drums into the muted dough with the bottom of her palms. I fold my half back onto itself. Conversation arises, and we both wonder when this will blend, or if it ever will.
Thank you. Are you a skilled dough fryer?
Hmm?
Are you a skilled dough fryer?
My grandmother usually does that part. I like to make the dough together.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, wow.
scared of the hot oil.
Yeah, that is just the imagery again that you create is so beautiful, and I mean, just respect for time and for forebears is just really very heartwarming. Yeah, and then just listening to your poetry, thinking about your dad and the language transition and what gets
Mhm.
lost, and then how you communicate without language as well through the tradition and the gesture.
Right.
And 3 poems, an impressive body of work. So, wow, you're
Thank
just
you so
amazing,
much.
Iris. Thank you.
Thank
W-
you.
Would you indulge us with this one more?
Sure.
Okay.
Um, I have excerpts from a Haibun suite I wrote. And it started with a Seven Deadly Sins project for my creative writing class, and it kind of took its own form from there, but I'll just read a few
Okay.
excerpts from it. And it's titled With the Skin and All. 1. Mother makes me take food when I go to my friend's house. I resent, filtering through her grappling hands like sand. You know nobody eats her foreign food. Out of anger, she tells me I am a bad omen, forces the food into my arms, adds an orange for better luck, and pushes me out the door. Carelessly, my friends snag the bowl, pick and sneer at its contents. They take the fruit, sucking all the juice out and leaving me with the skin. Hands and knees kissing the floor, I pick up the vestige leftovers. This is my thank you and my merciless disdain with the skin and all. 2. I still remember the view from my father's shoulders, the feeling of my forearms against his abrasive beard. I ran my fingers through his hair, created crevices like the familiar turns in my neighborhood, pretended they are the meandering courses of exile, compelling me to believe violence and love are the same thing. How does something you speak so highly of deceive you as well? Does your tongue freeze on the chilling taste of your culture? A wary moth battering wings around the silent flame? Blackened forewings, burnt antenna? Do you fly a little lower now? You were a mimic, evolving to avoid death, escape your imprisonment. 3. Envy comes in waves. Tonight, I'm drowning. The salsa jar I emptied last night reappeared in my nightmares. The bottom of the cap faced up in a recycling bin. Residue of tomato and pepper was fermenting on it. A lady repelled at its savory smell and closed the bin. Today, I woke to the same jar in the fridge, rinsed out and dried. It wasn't filled with tomato and pepper, but rather nauseating peels of banana, coffee grounds, and eggs. It's for the plants, Mother told me, and I imagined my nightmare. The lady, free of hoarding containers and stored rind, unconfined from the hurdles of stacked canisters in the bottom cabinet or the overflow of watered down salsa in the sink. Do not trash the egg. Put the shell in the glass jar with the skin and all.
Wow, Iris, thank you so much for that sequence. That was quite the journey. So I'm just wondering. I mean, just listening to your poems, I'm learning a lot about you, your culture, your heritage. Um, what did you learn about yourself in the writing process, or from the time you took a decision to try out poetry onward? What was your biggest self discovery? Would you say?
I think I learned that before I started writing, I was very critical about my culture and just my family's story. And I think that kind of came from a self point of wanting to fit in and be a little bit more normal. But once I was given the opportunity to express myself and find out more about my family, I feel more proud about it, and I'm more interested in like figuring out all these bits and pieces of stories. And as I'm writing, I'm learning more about myself and I'm learning more about my family, and I'm creating these connections and these bridges, and I'm learning like what am I interested in, what am I passionate about now. And I think it really made me appreciate the stories my family would tell me, and I'm not little Iris anymore, kind of bored at the dinner table, like, oh my goodness, I want to go play with my toys now. And I think that really made a big step for me, and especially in maturing and learning what I want to do in college as well.
That's great. And what would your advice be to somebody considering picking up the pen for the first time? They hear about a poetry group or a creative writing class and they have cold feet. What would you recommend to them?
I think my biggest piece of advice would be to not be afraid. I think the communities that I found, and many different communities that I found within writing, have been the most accepting and the most forgiving community I've ever met. I mean, you could have a Dr. Seuss poem and people will still congratulate you for it, and people will still like appreciate what you wrote, because I think people in the writing community know and they appreciate how much time and effort that you're putting into your poetry, and how brave you have to be able to share it, or even to show up to a class, because it's not an easy thing and it's not something that everybody does. And to be able to be vulnerable with yourself. But even if you're not writing about your own personal experiences, you're writing about something completely fictional, it's how brave you have to be to share your thoughts and share how your mind works with other people, but even to just share it with the page itself. I mean, it can be scary to start writing it down and seeing the words staring right back at you, and you're like, is this good? Is this not good? But it's the more you practice, the better you're going to get and the more comfortable you feel with what you're writing. So don't be afraid to go out and try new things and start it, and also practice, 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 especially if you want to start speaking and reading your poetry out loud. I think my Art Center East readings were probably the best practice I could have gotten for learning how to read my poetry. And even when I make mistakes when I'm reading it, you forgive yourself more in the moment. So.
Well said, Iris. Amazing. You are quite the teacher in your own right. Thank you for sharing those insights and for sharing your amazing poetry and your family and your culture through your creative work. I'm very, very grateful.
This has been People and Their Poems, presented by Oronog Mountain Publishing. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to check the show notes for more information about this episode. Visit OronogMountainPublishing.com for more information about our services and writing opportunities. And visit peopleandtheirpoems.net to learn more about the podcast.